Arc 6, Chapter 10, Like a Flash. Disturbing the vast land of the sand dunes was a flower meadow with a variety of colors. It was nighttime, and mysteriously, the starlight was not visible in the sky of the sand dunes. The reason why the sky could not be perceived, despite there being no gathering of clouds, was that the miasma enshrouding the space above ground covered this vast sea of sand. That was the explanation given beforehand. It was not clear to Subaru whether the one that had given that explanation had been Beatrice, or Emilia, or Julius. What was clear, however, was that rather than the imperceivable look of the sky, the alarm bell of caution should be directed towards the ground, for the ominous bloom of the flower meadow undefeated in front of the darkness of the night. The vivid, rather venomous flowers were excessively mismatched in the sea of sand.
A flower meadow among the sand dunes?
While voicing it, Subaru noticed that there was an unsettling feeling in the string of words he pronounced, one that he was already aware of. Emerging at the back of his mind was the information gathered in the bar of Mirula. The bartender there, who had lost one of his legs, had spoken of the flower meadows that appeared in the sand dunes. If flower meadows are spotted in the sand dunes, run away at full speed, was what he had said. Because those are the turfs of the ferocious, ugly witch beasts, the Courtesan Bears.
But even if you say run away at full speed...
Pointing out the weakness in those words, Subaru, while gazing ahead, stepped back. The flower meadow was the territory of a witch beast. That information was beneficial. There was also the mention of immediately running from the ferocious and atrocious witch beast that he was sure to follow. But if there was a problem, it was its scale. Keeping their silence, Subaru and the others, who were lined up in a row, held their breaths. In front of them, having surmounted the menace of Sandtime, having broken through the distortion of space, what had appeared was the continuous desert leading to the Watchtower. Their lines of sight were now filled with a stretching flower meadow. It was, quite literally, dense enough for there to not be a single spot to step on. Springing forth all of a sudden in the desert was the paradise of the flower meadow. There were limits even when it came to shadiness. It was something that they would have avoided even without the warning of the bartender. That was precisely why. If flying through the sky was an option, then they would have chosen that and avoid this without any hesitation whatsoever.
There's no way we can avoid this.
Murmuring in a way such that there was no difference between speaking and a hoarse sigh, Subaru aimed his words towards Meili. Under the present conditions, regarding their countermeasures against witch beasts, relying on Meili was an unexpected benefit. Whatever decision she made would determine the outcome, but the girl's face was quite pale as she glared at the flower garden. Blood vanquished from her light-complexioned skin, replaced with a cold sweat. Without the need of any words, it was plain to see that she had quite the negative situation in her hands. Slowly, Patrasche, with her massive frame, edged closer. She was unbelievably quiet for such a large beast. Seeing Beatrice's silent command from the perch on the dragon's back. Jump on, in fact. Subaru placed a foot in the stirrup, taking care to make it as quiet as possible as he once again mounted aside his partner. Whether they moved forward or back, Subaru's own feet would be useless against the tide of drowning sand. Though he would steer via the reins, it was Patrasche's chunky thighs that Subaru rely on for their swift movement.
For now, it seems everyone is sleeping.
Holding his breath, how much time had they waited for Meili's judgment? After tens of seconds had passed, or to him it felt like it had been nearly an hour, Meili spilled that out, as if whispering. In response, Subaru, with energy draining from his shoulders, brought Patrasche closer to the dragon carriage.
That flower meadow is the territory of the Courtesan Bear. That's the situation, right?
Based on what we were told before, for now that does not seem to be wrong, but it is just... the scale is larger than what I had expected.
That difference in scale is addition of something as cute as it being twice or thrice, I suppose.
Letting out a single sigh, Subaru and the rest, facing each other, exchanged their thoughts. Julius and Beatrice, too, at the great reception surpassing their expectations, were in a state of having lost their voices. The one inside the dragon carriage, Emilia, and the rest, their voices of delight after having broken through Sandtime too, had come to a halt as they were showing their faces through the small window, wondering what had occurred.
Subaru, did something happen? The sound of the sand wind can't be heard anymore.
We did a good job of clearing Sandtime, and just when I thought we had cleared the first hurdle, the second hurdle was standing here immediately waiting for us, as you can see.
As you can see, you say.
Seeing the clearly visible flower meadow at a single glance through a small window, Emilia's throat froze in shock. She had also heard what the bartender had said. Of course, the information she recollected must have also been the same. Emilia repeatedly blinked her eyes, and beside her, Anastasia and Ram also showed their faces. The two had also gazed at the flower meadow and grimaced at the cruelty of the trials to reach the Watchtower.
Even after passing through the sand wind and Sandtime, the obstacles this time are the flower meadows, huh? Anastasia, do you happen to know anything about these Courtesan Bears?
Guiding the way is my job, and I'd be trouble if y'all expect more than that. But gotta admit, this has been more tricky than I can contend with. What should we do now?
Holding expectations from the opinion of Aridna, she, while shrugging her shoulders, did not seem to possess a plan to overcome the obstacle. Subaru let out a long breath from his nose and looked at Meili.
Meili, your constitution withstanding, can you push back all of those wish beasts? Right? Plucking Courtesan Bear after bear out from this meadow?
It's difficult, you know. If it's 10, 20, or even 100, I can take care of them. But more than that, some of the beasties just don't listen to my instructions, I'm afraid.
There's a limit to the number, huh?
There's a limit to the quality of the ask, too, you know? I can't exactly ask too much of the white whale or the great rabbit. The Courtesan Bears, as well, are all just messed up for me. Totally different from the Shadow Lion.
Shadow Lion? Oh, that large one who showed up at the mansion. Right.
Putting a stop to their conversation about old memories, Super considered Meili's opinion and glared at the flower meadow. Countless. A vast paradise of flowers, just as expected. Even an estimate of the number of witch beasts could not be determined, but it was clear that it was easily more than 100, which was Meili's limit.
At the moment, we can say that the choices we have are to either continue or retreat.
Julius lifted 2 fingers and turned his neck towards the silent Subaru. Seeing that, Subaru inhaled.
You know, retreat was never an option. Nothing would be solved. It'd be a waste after clearing the Sandtime. There's no point in putting it off.
If we dive into a different Sandtime, we may be able to challenge the Watchtower from a different path. Is it not short-sighted to block the path without considering it?
Sandtime occurred 3 times a day, and Julius was insisting that one of those times was the answer. Assuming that others had escaped from the late-night Sandtime, but there was also the one in the morning and the afternoon. Super wondered if it was possible that choosing a different Sandtime could lead them to different destinations. He doubted that, however, and gestured his doubt by shaking his head.
Even if we took a different route, there's no way it's just going to go recklessly sail us all the way up to the Watchtower. This flower field may be risky, but other places have different obstacles, no doubt. Probably no easy path waiting for a casual stroll.
Indeed. It seems I was a bit overly optimistic after all.
Besides, Meili being here with us against these Courtesan Bears' lair, this might actually be the most viable path. Though, that possibility isn't exactly the best.
This time, excessive pessimism, huh? As always, it is your forte to denounce and uplift, is it not?
Oh, I don't do it on purpose. So, Meili, what's your input?
Harshly telling Julius off, who rounded his eyes at how unfavorable the situation was, Subaru turned towards Meili. Silent, gazing intently at the flower meadow, Meili, at Subaru's words, said, with her gaze cast downwards.
Yeah, the numbers are a bit tough. if you're telling me I gotta, well, I'll give it a shot. It doesn't mean I have to make every one of the bears listen, right?
Not everyone, you say?
To get through the field, we just need to calm down a few of the Courtesan Bears, like just the barest of minimums, right? We'll just ask them to scoot, and then they can go rest quietly after that. As long as we don't disturb them too much, I should be able to handle that much.
As if gaining certainty in her thoughts while answering the doubt, strength returned to Meili's voice. At the very least, she had a stance of respecting Subaru's choice of continuing. That was something to be genuinely grateful for. Subaru nodded to Meili and looked at everyone's faces.
I think we should move forward. Regardless, there's not going to be much progress without taking a risk. Running away from a potential problem won't bring potential solutions. That's for sure.
Despite being one who relies on others, you sure do talk big, my lord.
Rem fired bitter words at Subaru, who had suggested to proceed. Receiving her typical words, Subaru let out a, "Oh," and raised his thumb.
In the end, it's definitely all on Meili. If by some chance we do end up provoking the witch beasts, then our lives are left to Emilia, Julius, and Bearco. Sorry, guys! Oh, also, Patrasche too. My bad.
He caressed his beloved dragon's head, who had raised her neck up in discontent at having her name absent as one of the members he could rely on. Against that pathetic declaration of Subaru's, Ram, with a frankly astonished expression, shrugged her shoulders.
Your being aware makes it all the more unforgivable. At best, when the time comes, play the role of decoy.
Huh. Hearing that is also pretty nostalgic. You may not remember it, though.
At the words somewhat pertaining to the past, Ram made an anxious face. He had been slapped with words like those by Ram, both in the Forest of the Witch Beast, or on the morning of the day they headed out to the royal capital for the royal selection. With Ram's existence disappearing from her memories, and accompanying memories altered, now, where must have the back and forth of that day vanished off to?
Let's go. To get it back. I don't want to backtrack for even a second. Not anymore.
I agree. I also think it's just as Subaru says.
At Subaru's decision, who hardened his fist, consented Emilia with a gallant expression. She touched the pendant on her neck, and stole the feelings of the spirit sleeping within the large spellstone into her fingers, and then her amethyst eyes earnestly focused on the flower meadow.
Beyond this flower meadow is the key to precious memories. Let's go without stopping. I will definitely make sure to protect everyone. Ain't it a bit too lame to be told that by a girl?
At Emilia's majestic declaration, Anastasia spoke as she looked towards Subaru. He wished to retort with a "shut up." But the truth was, if it did turn out just as Emilia said, he thought that would be the best, as there would be nothing to worry about left. At a glance, the distance of the Pleiades Watchtower had shrunk to roughly a few kilometers. Before crossing Sandtime, back when they were only recklessly pushing through the Agoria sand dunes, the tower seemed ever distant, never appearing more or less than 10-odd kilometers away, no matter how they traveled. Compared to that, the difference was staggering. Arrival was close at hand.
But anything and everything comes after escaping away from this nest of the Courtesan Bears.
Vast fields of flowers stretched endlessly before them, an unnatural sight amidst the barren scape of sand, boldly alerting of something anomalous. These flowers are not the natural plants rooted into fresh soil, rather their stems and bases hovered ever so slightly, revealing an ugly truth. These flowers did not grow from the earth, but from the very flesh of the monstrous beings itself. To escape the territory of the Courtesan Bears, which Meili had instructed Subaru and the others, was simple. Be as silent as possible. According to her remarks, the Courtesan Bears were currently lying dormant. They would not thoughtlessly wake them up, but in exchange for that, it seemed they would not be able to get an idea of the ferocity of the witch beast upon being rinsed from slumber.
Bad little beasties seem most nasty right after they start moving, you know? heard pitiful white whaley was put down, but not until it became super vicious and troublesome right after it came out of the fog.
That was the digression Meili spoke of regarding the white whale. Thinking about it in accordance with that exposition of hers, there had been the exact moment when Subaru and the rest had encountered the white whale at the Lyphaeus Plains. In other words, immediately after I had woken up, had been the worst of timings. Recollecting on that grueling battle, Subaru couldn't help but belatedly pat himself on the back, for it was a miracle they won at all. But that aside...
Naturally, little ones are feisty when waking up. Same whether it's a person, an animal, or one of my little nasty beasties, you know? So, be real quiet, okay? So long as you can manage that, leave the rest to me.
Abiding by her strong-willed remarks, Meili commenced the march of the group who had clamped down their breathing. Their battle formation had switched from the one formed for the purpose of overcoming the sand dunes, with the dragon carriage proceeding further ahead. Sitting on the coachman's platform, conveying her intentions to the Courtesan Bears, was Meili. In accordance with those aims, Julius drove the dragon carriage further. Patrasche, being operated by Subaru, was running right next to the dragon carriage without leaving its flank. Feeling himself bend and holding his breath, Subaru clutched onto Beatrice's petite form. Her body temperature could be felt, and it seemed that she had stiffened her body, feeling nervous. Looking at the dragon carriage, upon its roof was a figure, one who need not be suspected, for the familiar silhouette was that of Emilia. Noticing Subaru's gaze, Emilia aimed her amethyst eyes towards him and raised her hand. The reason why Emilia was lying in ambush like that upon the roof was so that she could move instantly in case of any issue arose. Though Subaru would have liked her to quietly stay within the dragon carriage, but with the support of Julius' spiritual arts gone, the only ally capable of long-range attacks was Emilia. It wasn't as if Beatrice couldn't do it herself if pushed, but a single large blow would exhaust Subaru's reserves. It was a part of Subaru's inferiority complex that, in terms of strength, he had to depend upon others for protecting him, even though he should be protecting. If that had been the case, if there had been no need to do so, maybe even Rem, the weakness of thinking that way was always present within Subaru. As such uncompromising emotions beyond his control began to rise, the back of Beatrice's head pushed up his jaw. At Subaru's surprise, Beatrice snorted her nose. Focus on what is in front of you right now, was what she must have meant. Looking overhead once again, Emilia, too, had pointed her finger towards Subaru, and he understood that she was urging for similar caution. Unable to verbally express either compromise or understanding, he exhaled a deep sigh. The truth was that he wanted to slap his cheek and change his feelings, but that could put his life at risk, an action that could prove to be deadly. And practically at the same time as Subaru's usual detour thoughts gave rise to this resolution, the party's vanguard arrived at the flower meadow.
Move.
At once, Gian halted, pulling the dragon carriage, and Meili's faint voice slipped into the creaking sound of the wheels and was thrown towards the flower meadow. At first, there being no response to Meili's call, Subaru gritted his molars.
Move.
Once again, Meili called out the order. Even still, indeed, no change was born in the flower meadow. In the vexing stalemate, Subaru's stomach lining started to grumble with something similar to itchiness, and... with that distortion, the ground, as if truly being stripped off, and the flower meadow arose. Without thinking, looking straight at the form of the witch beast, Subaru's throat seized up. The witch beast, called the Courtesan Bear, befitting of its name, possessed a figure like that of a bear. However, it definitely was different from the bears in Subaru's recollection. Far too different. The Courtesan Bear possessed a stature perhaps around 2 to 3 meters. Its legs were short. In exchange for that, its arms were long enough to drag on the ground. Its arms were thick, visibly concealed under black fur, and it was possible to find claw-like nails growing at the ends. From the rear to the armpits of that body, there existed vivid flowers swaying in an impressive fashion, but observing the witch beast from close proximities, one's eyes tended towards the front rather than the rear of that body. Though its physique was concealed by black fur, creeping about that body was not body hair. Closely packed, wrapping the body, were the finely jumbled together roots of the flowers. They appeared as if blood vessels were floating on the skin, the minute roots covering the body of the witch beast. On the body, covered with tightly packed roots, the area which the roots did not reach were abnormally parched, and both the flesh and skin had withered. Its facial features, its cranium, had reached the limit of dehydration to the point where it was visibly obvious, and its circular, bulging eyeballs were bloodshot, wielding hatred for everything in this world. That seemed to be as if the flowers whose roots were pasted upon its bodies were slurping on its life force. The Courtesan Bears could not coexist with the flowers. Clearly, the flowers were sapping away its life. The witch beast, which gave off an unbearable feeling of revulsion merely looking at it, following Meili's words with sluggish movement, slowly pulling out its body from the ground as the roots got uprooted from the desert from which nothing could be absorbed. 1,000 sounds of snapping limitlessly followed. For opening up space just so that the dragon carriage could pass, the moving Courtesan Bears reached 100 and some, and as if knowing no end, their numbers continued to increase.
Phew.
Faintly, Julius's sigh was audible as the dragon carriage resumed proceeding. Julius, in that state, his body hair standing up due to the spectacle in front of his eyes, must have failed to weather it. Attached to the rear of the dragon carriage, two of the others also entered the path bloomed open by the Courtesan Bears. The moment Subaru stepped into the territory of the Courtesan Bear, an overwhelming perfume of floral aromas assaulted his senses. It was nothing like the malodorous scent of the sand earthworm prior, yet the swirling array of saccharine scents became overwhelming, almost violent in their intensity. The invasive fumes bled into his sinuses, catching his mind into a burning inferno. The gears in his head started to stick and slow, as if sapped by the sensation. This was not a joke. Subaru was beginning to feel his head spin and even throb with a new headache. Having cursed a sand wind prior, he for once thought it was much preferable to the current sensation. It might even just sweep away this cloying, poison-like scent clinging around his body, and for that, he'd welcome it gladly. As if having noticed something, Beatrice pulled Subaru's sleeve. Looking at her, wondering what had come up, she was incessantly concerned regarding something behind them. Turning around with a gesture, whilst keeping that repulsive premonition in mind, he understood the meaning behind her reaction. The gap Meili had chanced to allow their passage was now steadily sealing behind them. As soon as the dragon carriage and Patrasche had been led through, the flowers at the outer edges slowly fit back into place behind them, restoring the meadow to its original state. It seemed that the order Meili gave would have completed, and thus resulting in a return to their previous positions, resuming their dormant state. Even if Subaru had been thinking about going back, stopping midway was hardly an option. Amidst this coven of witch beasts, Subaru didn't have a single desire to return a step backwards in the den, not even as a bit.
Huh?
The moment immediately after he had thought that, the dragon carriage's advance came to a halt. Looking at the front, while wondering what had happened, the reasoning behind the dragon carriage's pause was explicit. A lone Courtesan Bear, in front of the dragon carriage, had gotten up, was standing still, and turned its hollow eyes toward the two people in the coachman's seat. With that one making strange movements, the movements of the Courtesan Bears in the vicinity started to change too. The feet of the Courtesan Bears, who had, until now, placidly and obediently made their way, stopped, and as if tracing the actions of the one staring at the dragon carriage, their gazes accumulated on the dragon carriage. this is bad, was the intuitive realization Subaru had. Looking back, they had already covered several hundred meters since entering the flower meadow. With the pathway behind plugged up, it was clear that they had been surrounded by the Courtesan Bears from all directions. Their numbers were in the hundreds, possibly even the thousands. A violent difference in numbers. Thinking that, his gaze entwined with Emilia's, who was on top of the roof. Emilia was looking down on the Courtesan Bear in front, and was puzzled over what kind of action she should perform to deal with it. If the outbreak of a fight could not be avoided, like they had done until now, then clearing the frontward of the dragon carriage with Emilia's magic and running through was the optimal way. However, she did not want to mistake the timing and rush things too fast. In front of Subaru and the rest, who were puzzled about what to do, the one with utmost composure was Meili. Putting a finger on her lips, she calmed the indecisive Subaru and the others beforehand. Following afterwards, she pointed the finger she had held on her lips towards the front, and scowled at the Courtesan Bear in front of her. Meili extended her finger, a sharp clicking sound escaping her lips, a noise akin to what one might do when coaxing a small kitten. If the target had been a kitten, it would make for an endearing sight, but against this monstrous beast, there was nothing quite so comforting about it. Guided like a conductor with a rhythmic sway of her finger alongside the continued clicking of her tongue, the Courtesan Bear's gaze slowly shifted. No longer fixated on the two riders atop the coachman's seat, his attention was drawn to Meili alone, and on that wagging digit. At the same pace, ensuring that the Courtesan Bear's focus was on the finger, Meili slowly swung her hand, which had her fingers pointed towards the right of the dragon carriage. Lured to the movement of that arm, the Courtesan Bear that had brought the dragon carriage to a standstill turned his face towards that and moved, taking a single step in that direction. Almost out of reflex, Subaru let out a sigh of relief, leave his throat at the sight of the Courtesan Bear's effort of moving away from the carriage. Emilia, and maybe Beatrice, who had stiffened their bodies up, also loosened their shoulders in relief. When the one who had caused the standstill moved, the other Courtesan Bears attempted to return to their own movements of distancing themselves. At the same pace as before, the march to the flower meadow resumed. Was how it was supposed to be. At that moment, the thread of tension snapped, and nobody could be condemned for raising their voice. Suddenly, in a moment of enduring and almost extreme deadlock, the thing known as the heart could not stand strong. That went for humans, and for ground dragons as well. Shattered upon with the malignant aggression of the Courtesan Bears from up close, Gian gave out a short growl and stamped its feet on the ground as if enraged.
Oh shit.
At Gian's roar, which abruptly cut off the silence, the Courtesan Bears, which were in a state of lying dormant, ratcheted together simultaneously. The one attempting to distance itself away from the drag carriage turned back, and that reaction infected the vicinity as well. The witch beast rose and leapt upon the dragon carriage with their bare fangs. Immediately before that,
Oh, Hilma!
the man materialized rapidly, and the spearhead of the formed ice lance penetrated through the witch beast's skull. The sharp tip of frost pierced through its large mouth, infringing upon its oral cavity, and broke through its nape. Its brain churned. The Courtesan Bear, without raising its voice, collapsed backwards as it faced annihilation. Caught up in his power, several Courtesan Bears, without pause, toppled sideways. "Run!" shouted Subaru, immediately after witnessing the preemptive attack by Emilia, who was on top of the dragon carriage. Agreeing with that decision, Julius operated the reins of the dragon carriage, started running fiercely instantly. Of course, Patrasche too followed that, jumping away from the side of the witch beast standing stock still, and broke off in a savage sprint.
They're coming! They're coming! They're coming! They're coming! They're coming! They're coming! Ah!
A beat later, a deafening series of roars shattered the night across the serene Agoria sand dunes. The vast flower field rippled as if a wave, and the Courtesan Bear pack, gnashing fangs and snarling grotesquely, charged forth with a relentless fury, surging towards the dragon carriage.
Subaru! Firmly grip on or you will get thrown off, in fact!
The overwhelming pressure that weighed around was like a blast of fierce wind, but was truly the murderous intent coming from the ravenous, countless Courtesan Bears raining down upon them all. A thick arm, armed with razor-sharp claws, swung upward with terrifying force, ready to strike Subaru atop the dragon carriage. If it landed, the blow would punch a hole through his body with ease, ripping flesh and spilling guts in a flash. Yet, just as the impalement came, a pale blue-white ethereal glow intervened, plunging into the beast's body with deadly accuracy.
Hey! Yeah! Alright! These! So many! Yeah!
As always, with the mana forming a whirlpool and a voice coming from her heart, giving the impression that the blue-white light was performing a boisterous dance in the dark sky. That was the transformation of countless sharp spearheads pointing above the ground into blades of ice. Immediately after stagnation, lasting a single moment, firing as if having acquired propulsive force, the craniums, the arms, the torsos, and the legs of the Courtesan Bears swarming upon the dragon carriage were torn in shreds, giving rise to spouts of blood.
Oh, as expected of Emilia, I'm falling for you again!
This is not the time for saying such things, is it? Run!
Yes!
Having his life saved by Emilia's followed up, Subaru further accelerated Patrasche. And with the sudden exchange, Emilia was coping with the fight with surprising composure. In retrospect, even if Emilia had shirked from fighting, it was not as if fighting intimidated her. The tendency to avoid fighting within her was an indecision that would be erased once battle had broken out.
Protasu, run until you collapse if you do not wish to die!
Yeah, of course! Ram?
The tough fight was being put up by Emilia. The bluish-white light mowed down the frontward of the dragon carriage. Altogether, and the group of Courtesan Bears, who had taken a roundabout path, were frozen at the same time, as Gian rushed and broke towards the ice sculpture. Now sitting on the driver's seat gripping to the reins was Ram, having suddenly moved from the passenger compartment. At Ram, who was skillfully handling the reins, driving the ground dragons in an agitated state, Subaru peeled open his eyes and let his gaze wander around.
What about Julius?
It seemed like he'd be utterly useless up in the driver's seat without a means of ranged attack. That's why...
At a glance, Ram looked towards the rear at Subaru's call. Lured to that line of sight, and looking backwards, Subaru thoughtlessly felt dumbfounded. Biting the sand, beside the dragon carriage with its wheels roaring, clinging onto one of the ornaments, waving about the grass knight's sword, was the form of Julius, clearing away the approaching witch beasts.
Burdening Emilia-sama with responsibilities and such cannot be done either, you see?
Was that directed at me?
That would be...
Pausing his words there, Julius had his knight's sword meet with the claws of the approaching witch beast. The decapitating slash weaved through the gap of those claws and deeply gorged into the arms of the Courtesan Bears. At the same pace, the dancing tip of the sword pierced through the throats of the witch beast, who let out scream, and, as if in a flash, it granted death by destroying the brainstem. That dance, with minimal destruction, was truly debonair.
Wrong.
Successfully crushing the witch beast, Julius voiced what remained of his reply to Subaru while dusting away his sword. Subaru made a bitter face at the gesture, tasting reassurance with a sense of defeat. Simply, having put Emilia in charge of the long range, clearing away the close range was up to Julius. If that structure were to continue, the concern regarding the dragon carriage could be saved for later. That was a problem for their internal affairs person anyway.
Beiko, can you go for it?
Subaru too! Be careful that you don't run out of gas, I suppose!
Above Patrasche, raising his body, Subaru held the reins with one hand and grabbed onto Beatrice with the other, standing her small body on top of the dragon. Steadily clasping each other's hands, something throbbed in the interior of Subaru's guts. Like hot magma, it slowly streamed from Subaru's body into Beatrice's.
Minya!
Crystals of violet materialized with the chant, and aimed for the witch beast blocking the path ahead of the ground dragon's nose. Accurate aiming, momentary advancement, the outcome was visible immediately afterwards. Raising a sound like that of shattering glass, the magical attack directly struck the witch beast, and the crystals fragmented. The following moment, the body of the witch beast fragmented similarly as well.
Alright! Good going, Beiko!
But reckless firing cannot be done, in fact. Cautiously saving... Minya!
Is that conserving it?
Beatrice's battle strength depended upon the mana reigning inside Subaru. In order to oppose the overwhelming advancing threat, Even Beatrice was unable to compromise much. Sense of loss, as if his soul was being diminished with every single attack of magic. Subaru, talkative and composed, abated Beatrice's nervousness. Of course, such consideration was clearly visible to Beatrice.
Seriously? How did it end up like this? This is supposed to be my ace in the hole!
Thus, the ultimate weapon stood up to those who had been standing their silence until now, and stepped on the ground. A driver, having been sat beside Ram, Meili, with her eyes tearing up, surveyed the swarm of Courtesan Bears crowding around their surroundings while making a red face. Then she pointed a finger towards the witch beast, who would not obey her.
I'll give you a scolding to the bad animal sands! Come on, sand earthworm!
No way!
Immediately after Meili pouted and tantrumed like a child, the desert that had turned up thanks to the rise of Courtesan Bears, and with the underneath of that sand being stirred up subsequently, a huge frame rushed out, swallowed within the momentum of the gigantic beast, pushing its whole body out from the underground. The countless Courtesan Bears dragged within were launched up to the sky. Falling on the sand from high altitude, the witch beasts had their bones broken, and the unfortunate Courtesan Bears directly above that humongous mouth got chewed up, thrashing around while tearing apart the desert. The one laying waste upon the repulsive flower meadow was the sand earthworm. With a foul smell and a strange voice cutting through the twilight, the sand earthworm decided that the bear clinging to the side of the carriage was its prey, and with a leap of its huge frame, it crushed the bear in one fell swoop.
Go! Sand earthworm! Crush everyone! Everyone!
Are you serious? Hey! Are you serious? Are you serious? Are you serious? Hey, hey, hey!
The weight, capable of making the very ground rumble, writhed through the sand steam, and the wails of the Courtesan Bears being crushed by the pressure of the humongous frame echoed. Courtesan Bears, too, did not possess a weak frame whatsoever, but they could not possibly compete with the figures of the sand earthworms, whose overall length could be even above 10 meters. The overwhelming difference in mass resulted in collision, and the Courtesan Bears got successfully turned into corpses. In the commotion, which was a decisive battle between monsters at this point, Subaru had no words to appropriate for it. Emilia and Beatrice's magic, Julius' swordsmanship, Emilia's unusual talent narrowly cleared the way, and the dragon carriage and Patrasche rapidly proceeded through the flower meadow.
Ah! The sandworm is!
Meili's shriek was heard. Observing it, the sand earthworm, possessed by a great number of Courtesan Bears who had their claws gouged into that humongous fame, was shedding large quantities of bodily fluids from its entire body and collapsed on the ground. The outer skin of the slimy and soaking wet sand earthworm was not something as sturdy as that of snakes or insects. The skin sustaining the soft body easily fell prey to the claws, and a wail of agonizing death reverberated through the sand sea.
Next! 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 Keep coming! Fast!
One single giant collapsed, and Meili clapped her hands with a pallid face, and lured to that, once again the sand was uplifted, and a different sand earthworm made its appearance. This time, there were 6 at the same time. However, compared to the first one, they were twice as small. And if they were to get enclosed by the swarm of Courtesan Bears, they would get hunted down in a blink of an eye.
At this pace...
They would get defeated by the violence of numbers. With a sense of terrible hopelessness, Subaru desperately looked at the surroundings and searched for something that could help them break out of this deadlock. And he noticed the Watchtower that had been so distant was close enough to be said that it was right before their eyes.
Just a little bit left! If we can reach the Watchtower at this pace!
The beast didn't retreat, not by any means, but for a fleeting moment the tide seemed to present the slightest path, a single thread that held far more weight than it should have. It's not like Subaru had any grand thoughts or plans. It was simply this lingering hope. If I can reach the Watchtower, that perhaps there'd be a power that could turn the tide of the situation. It was a hope born merely out of desperation, clinging to the faintest line of hope. And, as it turned out, that feeling bore fruit.
At this rate...
However, that power is not offered for just any to bend to their will as they saw fit, but rather a hammer of righteous fury that buffeted the landscape with callous equality upon those who dared approach the Pleiades Watchtower with ill intentions. Heavy lids opened, Subaru clinging to Patrasche's rough scales while supporting Beatrice aside. glaring at the watchtower looming overhead. Sweat dripped down his face as he momentarily caught a glint. An unsettling sensation began to stir within him.
What?
That was his last word, but it never escaped. A crack of light streaked across the sky, and hitting dead on its target, it struck Subaru squarely between the eyes. In an instant, the top of Natsuki's Subaru head was sheared off by the impact, consciousness spilling into the desert sand below, his body evaporating to boiling light, as if a flash, leaving nothing behind. The tragedy of the scene was silent, not a single cry raised. For those who might have witnessed it, those who should have screamed in shock, were all likewise turned inside out. The earth dragon, its head gone, collapsed with a dry thud. Caught in the violent tipping of the dragon carriage, human bodies, too headless, were crushed, snapped, and reduced to scattered chunks of flesh. All that remained was a welling oasis of crimson blood, the dry sand, eagerly drinking its craved moisture. Slowly, ever so slowly, the fine sand pulled it all into reservoirs deep below, as if hiding any evidence of the traveler's journey. The only trace would be a newly budding flower of bright red, vividly beautiful against the sand. But even that nascent beauty would eventually be ripped apart by the blowing wind cutting across the dunes.